Hey, this is Kanzer. I've noticed that there's a lack of videos out on the web in regards to Perus hard mode dungeons, and I've also noticed that there are many players, especially tanks, who need a few tips and tricks to improve their hard mode experience. So I'm attempting to do just that. Now, before we get started, I just want to point out that my Lancer is indeed my alt, and I by no means claim to be an expert at it. However, I have been tanking hard modes fairly consistently, and so I found several tricks and patterns to bosses that help me immensely in tanking successfully. First, I'll go over the 3 essential glyphs that you must have in order to be a good tank. Note, this is not including masterwork glyphs at all, because this is my alt, I have not got around to attaining those yet. So let's get down to it. Now the first of these glyphs is going to be the glyph of Threatening Challenging Shout. As Challenging Shout is your highest aggro generation move that you have, you must have this glyph for the 100% increase. The next one is going to be Threatening Shield Counter. Shield Counter is not nearly as much threat as Challenging Shout, but it's more than anything else that you have, so you need to take it. And finally, the last one is Lingering Debilitate. It's good to keep that debuff up on your target, and so having it last for 30 seconds instead of the 11 or 12 that it initially does is extremely helpful in keeping that up. Now, crystals are pretty straightforward. You're going to want to take all threatening cruxes in your weapon slots, and in your armor, it's depending on the situation. Once you get comfortable with bosses and you're enraging them, or you know that they're enraged a lot of the time, you can get away with poised cruxes. They're basically like anarchic, except for enraged monsters. But other than that, you're going to want to stick with all anarchics. Now, the first boss in Fane of Kaprima hard mode is Elite Pervathis. However you say his name, I don't really know. But he's your basic Friendless boss, except he's a lot angrier than most of them. Now, I will say that this boss spends a lot of time enraged, especially if you infuriate him at the beginning, and so it's a good idea to wear Poised Cruxes instead of Anarchics, as if the healer messes up on the pillars, it's a guaranteed wipe, and therefore you don't want to lose any Anarchics on this boss. It's not really worth it. He's not too dangerous anyway, so yeah, wear some Poised Cruxes, you'll be just fine. Now, the way you want to position this boss is as soon as you go into the room, you just want to face him to the left. And a lot of tanks will try to drag him back to the left wall, but I noticed that just wastes a lot of time because he can be a pain to move. And so what I do is I just face him to the left, and then I let him push me back at his own leisure. This lets you focus more on aggro rather than trying to position the boss. Because DPS, they're going to be wailing on him regardless, as this is a DPS race fight, so just face him to the left, let him push you at your own leisure. Now, the most important thing you want to do with this boss to keep him still is you'll notice that he'll occasionally just take a couple steps back. Now, when he does this, this usually means he's going to lunge toward you and then lunge really far back. Now, when he does this repeatedly, it really hurts DPS as they get trampled and knocked over and the boss just simply isn't still. Now, a couple things you can do is you have some time to go forward and field slam him to try to stun him. But I've noticed a much higher success rate in just using my chains, whether it's Giga Chain or normal chain. So you'll notice every time he steps back, I will chain him in an attempt to keep him still. Now, DPS has some responsibility in this as well, but you know, I've learned not to rely on them to stun, and I just chain whenever he starts doing it, and it's a good thing to do. Other than that, I mean, this boss is pretty straightforward. Just try to keep him as still as possible, keep him faced toward the left, let the DPS do their thing, and yeah, as long as your DPS is high enough, you shouldn't have any issues with this boss. Now we have Nightmare Garuta. He's probably the most feared boss to new tanks and newcomers in general, as there's 4 drills on each side, they've heard the horror stories, and yeah. I'm here to tell you that it's not nearly as scary as you might think, and it's really not all that difficult. Now in this boss I'll go into a little more detail of when exactly you want to be taunting, when you want to be blocking. I do mess up a few times in this, as you can see. But there's a few things that he'll do. He'll do either a double claw attack, which is really not that dangerous if you get hit by it. But after he does that, he will often follow that with a very powerful attack where he lifts both his claws in the air like you see right now, and he'll slam them down. If that hits you, it's going to do a ton of damage, especially if it crits, and it's likely going to knock you over. So block that if at all possible, at all times. One of the next most powerful attacks he'll do is he'll like leap back twice and then lunge back toward you. This will most likely hit melee DPS and deal a lot of damage to them. And so because of this, you simply don't want to get hit by that as a tank, because it's just going to put unnecessary stress on the healer. It's very obvious when he's doing it. He goes back, leaps back towards you, make sure to block it. Another thing he'll do is, as you saw right there, he will just lunge both of his claws forward and push you back a little bit. Sometimes he'll do it several times in a row, so you might have to reposition him if he does it too much, so you're not too close to the spikes. Getting pushed back to the spikes is dangerous. Which leads me to his last really notable attack. What he'll do is he'll raise both of his claws into the air and start waving them around maniacally, like he's going to get you. And that's really what he's going to do. When he does that, he'll unleash a full barrage of claw attacks, and he'll just push you back pretty far distance a lot of the time. Now, if you're standing close to the spikes, you have a good chance of getting pushed into the spikes and then getting knocked over and then getting annihilated. So try not to keep him close to the spikes if you can help it at all. Other than that, he does the typical jump into the air and slam down into the ground, which is easy to block. You shouldn't be getting hit by that as a tank. Now, a couple things that can happen in this fight is, of course, as I've said before, you can get pushed back into the spikes. It's very dangerous that it happens, so try your best not to let that happen. And because of that, there's oftentimes you're going to have to reposition him. Now, one of the best ways that I found to reposition this boss to turn him around and face him the other direction is to always keep your camera face towards the boss. You'll notice me doing this throughout this fight, is I keep the camera face toward him at all times. So when I'm turning him around, I make use of the strafe keys rather than running forward. That way I can keep my camera centered on him, and if he attacks me while I'm trying to reposition him, all you have to do is block. Your shield will automatically go toward where the camera's facing. You can block the attack and then let go of the block and continue strafing and reposition him. Like as you see right there when I'm just doing that. I mean, it's very easy. You can guarantee yourself not to get hit by in the sides and the back and anything like that. So just make sure you're doing it. One of the few things that he can do to control you is when the spike starts spinning, he will do his little lash out charge attack and push the tank away and be moving at the same time. So the entire group needs to be fully aware that that can happen and make sure they stay behind the crab. Once again, tanks, strafe. Just strafe. Keep your camera towards the boss at all times, even when you're backing up, even when you're strafing. That way, if you have to block something quickly, your shield's automatically going to go to where your camera's facing, which is hopefully towards the boss. And as long as you remember that rule, you should never be get hit in the back or the sides or anything of that nature, and your healer will like you a lot more. Now this particular room isn't a boss per se, but if you do the shortcut timer successfully, you're going to have to encounter these guys. And to me, they're the scariest thing in this game. Scarier than any boss. And so I just put this here to show how I pull them. It's a safer way. You can pull them 2 and then 3. You can pull all 5 if you're feeling confident. It's not a big deal. Just make sure you block. And you might want to pray a little bit too. Yeah, these guys are super trolly. They will drain your mana really quick. They will hit you from the sides, so make sure you back yourself into the corner. And yeah, just be careful. The third boss in Fane of Kaprima hard mode is Nightmare Cornus. He's probably the most feared for Slayers and Warriors, as they typically have to go into the fire room. The fire room is a lot more difficult in hard mode, as the balls move twice as fast, they hit twice as hard. There's just a whole other strategy involved in it that I won't get into too much detail here. But you can probably watch from my perspective and see a little bit what's going on. The particular warrior we had in this case, he didn't die, but he took a very long time to do it, as you'll see. You know, we hit like 3 crystals in one fire room phase, and that's just way longer than I'm used to. So you won't get a good idea of the best way to do this, but he didn't die at least, so that's something. The pillars appear on each side like normal mode. The only difference is the priests come out a lot quicker. So unless your DPS is extremely high, you're going to get a priest pretty much every time. Just treat them normally, keep them stun locked, try to keep them knocked down, keep them off whoever they're DPSing because they have a really high knockdown chance. Other than that, as far as the tanking aspect goes, it's not really different at all from normal mode. He hits just as fast. He'll do the same patterns. He'll do his, he'll either do his shield counter, single attack, double attack, triple attack, onslaught. So you just want to watch him and get used to it, and just be timing your challenging shouts appropriately and your shield counters and keeping debilitate up. The most threatening thing in this fight is DPS taking aggro, because they can get one shot very easily, especially as he starts to buff up. So just make sure that you are, you're keeping your challenging shouts up consistently. Make sure you're shield countering consistently. Make sure you're attempting to stun him whenever he does his buff. You can tell he's doing it when he slams the shield, and yeah, just keep going. It can be a very long fight, especially if you have not so great of a group, but and now we get to Kaprima, the last boss. Easily probably one of the most hardest hitting bosses in the game, and because of this, if you're not blocking certain attacks, you can die very easily as the tank. And once one person dies in this, it starts a chain reaction of nastiness, especially since he has a 10-minute enrage timer in hard mode. So I'm going to go into really specific detail on when exactly are good times to taunt, when you absolutely must block, and just the best ways to keep aggro in general and survive. Alright, first I'm going to go over the times when it's generally safe to taunt. And you can see in the video all the examples I'm giving right now. The first one is after either Whirlwind. When he completes either of these Whirlwinds, you're going to have sufficient time to taunt before he does anything else. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is that when he does his Whirlwind like he's doing right now, you'll have to step up a little bit before you taunt, as he'll move out of your taunt range initially. So those are both good times. Another good time to taunt is after he does either of his scythe attack. When he slams his scythe into the ground on top of you, he's either going to follow up by slamming his scythe backward and hitting any DPS behind him. At that time, it's okay to taunt. Or he's going to follow up with an uppercut from his scythe and then a fire attack that's devastating. And after he finishes the fire attack, you can taunt then as well. Otherwise, just fit in a quick shield counter in between those phases. You'll have enough time. But make sure you block each one of those, as they will hurt a whole lot. Another great time to taunt is right now, as he does Feeble. You're going to want to block the initial scythe pound, and then you can taunt. And then you have plenty of free time to do whatever you need to do. You can shield barrage, you can spring attack, you can debilitate. You have plenty of time there. Just make sure you block and do your thing. Another great time to taunt is when he does the sup, as you see right now. It's the same thing as Feeble. You block the scythe pound, you taunt, and then you just block the circle. And yeah. Another great time to taunt is when he flies up into the air like he's doing right now. After he's landing, you have plenty of time to taunt, and you want to take advantage of that. So as he's landing, make sure you taunt, and then when he lands and hits, you can follow up with a shield counter. You'll occasionally notice his eyes will go red, and he'll just do a little backward spin and swing a scythe at the tank. After he does that, I've noticed that it's another opportune time to taunt. It's generally safe. You're not going to get annihilated if you do that. When he pulls the whole group in with his chain, it creates another good time to taunt, but also another thing to keep in mind is that after he pulls everybody onto the chain, he's going to follow up with the Scythe Pound. Now, as the tank, you're going to want to be wearing earrings with 0.8% stun reduction, so you get out of that stun as quick as possible. Because if you do not block that Scythe Pound, or if he doesn't get stunned beforehand, the DPS and healer is likely going to get knocked over, and this is going to mean they're not going to be able to get out of the circle in time. And so it's essential that you block that Scythe Pound. And after he does the Scythe Pound, it creates yet another great opportunity to taunt. So once again, you're seeing the pattern here. Block the Scythe Pound, taunt, and yeah, just go from there. Fit your shield counters in where you need to. Now, I'll get into the rest of the when to taunt when we get to 50% here, but generally you want to keep Kaprima centered best as possible in the middle of the room. Try to keep him away from the walls, and if you are close to a wall, keep his back faced toward where there's lots of space for the DPS and healer to move around and maneuver. Okay, he's going into the middle now. This creates another great time to taunt. He goes in the middle, he does a Scythe Pound. If you get in there in time, you can block that, and then you can taunt. And then you can just do your DPS and, spring attack, whatever. And then what he's going to do is he's going to make the circle, go out, block it, follow up with a shield counter, and then when he pulls everybody in and is flying up into the air, you can taunt before you go hide behind the snakehead. So you're generating a shit ton of aggro there if you do that perfectly. You block the circle, you taunt, and then you do your thing, you DPS, whatever. He does the circle, you block it, you shield counter, and then you taunt as he's flying up, and then go hide behind the snakehead. Chances are the snakehead's going to pull you in since you have highest aggro, hopefully. So you're probably not going to have to worry too much about it. And I mean, that really covers all the times. Now, one of the things I want to note is you'll see this the next time we get to the snakehead phase, but when you're hiding behind the snakehead and after it's done, as the tank, you can charge. What I like to do, and I'm the only tank that I've noticed that does this, but it's really extremely helpful for the DPS, is I will taunt, the snakehead breaks, and I will charge through Kaprima into the other side of him. And, immediately turn his back towards the DPS. This is extremely helpful. It saves a lot of time. Otherwise, the DPS is having to run all the way around to get behind the boss. And, positioning is your job as a tank anyway. So make sure it's something that you're doing. If you're worried, I've noticed there's a slight little glitch in that after the snakehead breaks, the first thing that Kaprima does after that is generally going to not hit anything but air. So you can generally charge to the other side of him and get a taunt off and be just fine no matter what he does. So all in all, the most important thing to remember with Kaprima is only taunt when it's safe, and make sure you're blocking pretty much everything he does. He has a high chance of knocking you down, and if he knocks you down, you're likely dead, because he's going to follow up with something else and just annihilate you. So it's just most important to block everything, only taunt when it's safe, learn that pattern, get that hold down, and just, if you're going to try to reposition Kaprima in any way, make sure you follow what I said back with the crab boss. Keep your camera face towards Kaprima at all times. That way, if he does something really quick that you need to block, all you gotta do is hit the block button, your shield automatically faces to where it needs to face, and yeah, it's the number one rule to follow as far as positioning bosses go. Never have your camera faced away from the boss. Just keep it faced there so you can block as you need to. Well, that pretty much covers everything you need to know as the tank. If you die, if any of the group dies, it's not impossible to recover, as long as you do so in a timely manner, so don't freak out too much, especially if you have good DPS. One of the other tricks that I'll just let you know, if aggro gets taken from you and Kaprima runs out of your taunt range, and you accidentally miss your taunt when you're trying to get him back, oftentimes you can leash him and you'll get aggro back for long enough to get your taunt off cooldown and get that going again. So just wanted to one of the few tricks that I've picked up with doing this numerous times. Hopefully this guide has helped you out. It's not really as formal as I usually make them, but I just wanted to make something just to help mainly my guild out and anybody else who's interested in learning how to tank this appropriately, especially if they're having issues. Because I definitely don't like when people quit, just when they're, you know, frustrated with dungeons or whatever. So, you know, just keep it going, learn the patterns. It gets easier as you do it, and you know, the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So if you're having major issues, just switch up your game, try new stuff, and you know, just try to adjust accordingly. And yeah, good luck.